I guess we'll talk about the new albums first. Um, in February, you guys released two of them, Changing the Narrative and This Was Never Home. Both albums have a different message and sound. What was the reason for this, and what were you guys hoping to accomplish with the two different records?
Well, the reason for it was we've been waiting for the music industry to get to a better place. You know, it's very hard to sell records today, and the industry has been sick for quite a while. And we've just been holding on, you know, recording various stuff, being creative, and waiting for that right moment. And then we felt like, after a while, I felt like there really is no point in just waiting. And the music is still so relevant, it's still so fresh, and it needs to be heard. So the first album, Changing the Narrative, we released for free because it had a lot of samples. And I come from a sample era, and I wanted to be able to use that as my way of expression. So we released a sample record, which is not done a lot nowadays. It costs too much for the return of sales. So we wanted to release it for free just to eliminate that whole problem. And then we released This Was Never Home as an opportunity to try to make up, you know, for what we're giving away and to sell some music too. So, you know, that has no samples on it, and yet it's another side of our creativity. And so we just wanted to sort of do both. And we felt like it was good because the hope is, when you mention what was the hopes, is to help people know that, number one, we're still here. Number two, that we're extremely relevant, that the things that we write are for us to be part of the dialogue and to be part of the hip-hop musical landscape as well, not just dialogue and lyrical landscape, but musically, to be a part of that, you know, dialogue. Because I'm a fan of hip-hop music, and I feel like the things that we do, I don't hear enough of it.
Yeah. No, I get that 100%. And you guys just released the music video for Out to the World. The song is essentially about spreading love to all corners of the earth, basically. It's such a simple message, and, you know, it's something that's unfortunately often forgotten. So what was kind of the thought behind that song and the music video, and why was that something that you really wanted to lead with for the album?
You know, when we first wrote that song, it was me, a brother named D-Focus, a producer named K.O., and another writer named Toy. And Toy wrote the chorus. She sort of set the tone for the record, and K.O. and D-Focus wrote the music. And so, really, I think that their initial point was, this is Arrested Development. You know, you guys bring a certain type of, or at least you offer a certain type of healing to the hip-hop landscape. And, and I think that that's one of y'all's roles. And I agreed. So I was like, definitely. And he played the track for me. K.O. played the track for me. And I loved it. You know, I felt like we do a lot of big venues and we do a lot of big places. I felt like this song could be a very good anthemic just song that pulls people together and reminds us of the power of love.
Oh, for sure.
Kind of corny, you know, because when you say that, for some reason, society has love as being corny sometimes. But I look at love as literally the most powerful force that the world has.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's just a great song. Like I said, the message is simple, and, you know, just people, it's something that we constantly need to be reminded of.
No doubt about it. And even you know, right now, as the elections are going on, there's so much divisiveness, there's so much division, that we feel like the song can help to spark another discussion of just our commonality as a human race. And so the video, we purposely sort of mixed faces in with each other and wanted to present a picture of a more of what are our commonalities as opposed to just the differences. And starting, whatever even our differences are, starting it off with the fact that I love you, that's a different point of launch than I disagree with you. You know, if you can start with I love you as the point of it, then it just comes from a different space, from our hearts, as we're trying to discuss even differences.
Excellent, excellent. And as a group that's been around for over 20 years, do you find that people are more receptive to Arrested Development's music now, or were they more receptive to it in the past, or is it kind of the same?
Well, it just depends. You know, we're blessed because we have a worldwide audience. When we're in Japan, they're very receptive to it throughout. When we're in Europe, same difference. Australia, same difference. Canada, same difference. However, in America, they're not even really aware that we have been a group since the 90s. So a lot of people feel like, well, what have they been doing? So, you know, we have that battle. And so I look at these releases as literally starting from scratch, as if we were an indie, no-name band in many instances. Because there's two factors. One is that people didn't know what we were doing, and other people don't know who we are in the first place because they weren't born when our music was released. And I'm around a lot of young people who literally weren't born.
So you're essentially trying to draw in a new generation, and to them, you're a new hip-hop group, and it's a totally different world now.
I mean, only thing I would disagree with that statement is trying. We're doing it. It's a process. That's the only thing. So it is, we are consistently and continuing to do that. But yeah, we're doing it.
Right. That's awesome. Now, many artists often cite influences and other musicians who they aspire to be like, but you guys were kind of revolutionary at the time because you stepped out of the box with a message and a real focus of your music. So what was it like to essentially help mold conscious rap, and you guys being the pioneers, like where did you draw from? Because you guys were kind of doing something original.
Honestly, it was from, just like anything that's original, it's really never original. It's just a mixture of things that have yet to be mixed together. And that was with us as well. Like, we were very inspired by, of course, Public Enemy. Public Enemy has more of a, and this is sort of not fair to say, but if I had to generalize, they had more of an angry message and a militancy from an anger standpoint. And then you have, like, a De La who had less of a message, but it was very daring with their musicality and samples, and very daring with their rhyme flows, you know, just very different, and stepped out on a limb with that. And then you had, you know, other groups like Jungle Brothers, who was message-oriented but sort of fun with it. And so, and then you had, lastly, a group like Fishbone, who's not in the hip-hop realm, that was just very, I don't know, just smashing stereotypes of what black people do and what kind of music we are into. And so I mention those four people or artists, because they all had some impact on creating what we create. And then at the same time bringing us, I mean, in other words, we ourselves are just unique in and of ourselves and just bringing what we bring to the table. But we were definitely inspired by a lot of people. I remember the first album, 3 Years, 5 Months, 2 Days, we were shopping it, you know, and I was just trying to get it to anybody I could, and I got lucky and got Pastanusa's number, and from Dayline, I wrote him and said, hey, man, I'd love for you to peep out our group, Arrested Development, and he was kind enough to listen to it. Number one, phone me back. Number two, I was a nobody, and you know, he said, man, I really like Rainy Revolution, and I think he liked one other song, maybe it was Give a Man a Fish, and he was like, you know, I really think y'all got something. And he couldn't do anything. He was already having problems with Tommy Boy. But the truth is that even just that response was so much to encourage us.
Oh, yeah.
Keep on going. You know what I mean? And keep on pushing forward. And obviously, we would obviously have a chance to get known by the world as well in the future.
Right. Now, that's a great story. And I've read in a few different places, so I guess you can shed some light on this, that Arrested Development, part of the reason why you guys were kind of faded away a little bit in the mid-90s was because of the rising like the gangster rap and the negativity that was put on the culture. Was that, or even is that, a tough stance to hold as an MC among peers and other artists in the industry? Did it upset anybody that you guys kind of weren't for the shift that hip hop was going in?
Well, let me put it into context how I saw it.
Right.
To answer your question, I'll answer the last part. Yes, it's very hard. It still is hard. But the context that I saw is this: in the beginnings of hip hop, you've always had an element of gangster in it. You know, you had Ice-T with 6 in the Morning, Schoolie D out of Philly, who was talking about gangster reality and ghetto reality. But then you also had all this other stuff. So you had anything from Tribe to Live Crew to MC Hammer to you name it. So you had all these variations of topics that were being discussed. And what started to happen in the early 90s, like 94, late 93, 94, 95, is a few things. One is some laws were passed that would make monopolies non-illegal and allowing big corporations to basically program not only the local radio station, but the local newspaper, the local video station. They can own all of them, and they can own them city after city. So huge corporations started to own up and buy up huge parts of the entire media system, and that would happen probably in '96.
Yeah.
But the point is it played a huge role in phasing out conscious hip hop. Period. Not just Arrested Development, but Public Enemy, X-Clan, you name it. So many groups. And also at the same time, there was this fight back from the corporations and the major labels of not wanting to hear messages that they couldn't relate to and that they didn't find entertaining, even though it was changing the very lifestyles of many people of color. College enrollment was going up because of the entertainment at the time. Book sales of certain knowledge that was not mainstream knowledge, whether it be Malcolm X biography or other things, was up as sale. People were changing, and the labels were not finding it as entertaining, and they were not willing to keep it going. And so we found ourselves fighting against the labels, but then also because the labels weren't wanting that, they were showing a whole lot of love to gangster hip hop, more so than they were conscious hip hop. Whereas before they were showing love to all of it.
Yeah.
Now they were showing love to only one side of it. And so then you had groups, and this is no disrespect to these groups, it's just what I noticed in this time period. You had situations where a Nas or a Wu-Tang or a Biggie and the whole Bad Boy movement was not just celebrated as good music, but it was celebrated as the main thing that you need to listen to and the main thing that was going to be promoted. And it was the only thing that ultimately started to be promoted. You'd find it hard-pressed to find conscious hip-hop during that time period that was getting the same type of promotion dollars and distribution dollars as a Bad Boy or as a, Wu-Tang and so on and so forth. So it's just a very different energy that they was promoting.
Yeah, and
it was unbalanced.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, you may disagree with me, but kind of refreshing to see now that some of that conscious hip-hop really is coming back strong and getting noticed, because I think the way the world is moving now, everybody is trying to be a little more conscious of everything that's going on, especially, politically and with just people's rights and things like that. And you have guys like a Kendrick or a J. Cole or, just all these guys that are out that are just trying to, I guess, put a little positivity in their music. I think it's really cool to see.
I do too. And yet, I wrote a song called The Trend and on our Strong album. And the thing that, while I agree with you that it is great to see a Kendrick and a J. Cole and others, it's still sad that for 15 years now, maybe a little longer, maybe even 20 years, it's been a bombardment and an oversaturation. Because if you think about J. Cole and Kendrick, how old are they in the game now? You know what I mean? Like, it's relatively new. Like, I don't know exactly when Kendrick and J. Cole jumped on, but I'm going to say less than 10 years. So I'm going to say maybe 7 years, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing it. But the point is that, you know, the takeover, in a sense, the gangster takeover that happened in the early 90s, it took, you know, all the way up, you know, let's say 2010 or 2011 before, or 2008 or 9, I should say, before there would be any type of, you know, balance again. And even now, I wouldn't say that there's a balance. I would just say that there's 2 or 3 people that we can mention nowadays that are having great success in bringing some positivity to the table, like a J. Cole or Kendrick Lamar. But I wouldn't say it's a balance anymore like it used to be.
Yeah. And while we're on that, I wanted to ask you, what do you think, aside from what we just spoke about, what do you think of, you know, the state of hip hop today? Do you think it's getting better, it's getting worse, it's kind of just all over the place? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think that it's very segregated. You know, again, one of the reason I believe people called the golden era of hip hop, late 80s, early 90s, is because there was so much diversity.
Yeah.
You had a smorgasbord of great music, and individuality was celebrated. Today, it's very segregated. You got some incredible indie hip hop artists, but if you're not an indie hip hop artist type of person that studies who's coming out and staying up on it, you wouldn't even know that they exist.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to be in a certain pocket to even know that they exist. Whereas, you know, the trap music scene and the just whatever you want to call it, I don't even know if I would call it gangster nowadays, but the other side of it where it's just really talk about strip clubs, partying, you know, whatever, that whole thing, that is by far the mainstream hip-hop, by far. And there's not tours where they're all touring together. There's not, you know, there's not a sense where this is all hip-hop music, come celebrate it. You have to just know the certain circles to get into to hear various crews and people that are ripping it. Like, you got your lyricist crews, you got your conscious crews, you know, you got your trap music or whatever you want to call it crews, circles. But they're not all mixed together, and you're not seeing tours together. You know what I mean? Where you're just able to just enjoy music.
Yeah, almost like that festival sort of atmosphere where you can hear just a bunch of different music. And
exactly, like back in the day, it was festivals that did that. You could have Houdini, LL, MC Hammer, Public Enemy, and Two Live Crew all on the same stage. Same stage.
Yeah.
And so that was just hip-hop. But then at the same time, you turn on the radio, and it's the same distance. You're hearing all of this stuff on the radio at the same time, and all of these artists were doing good numbers, too, because they were all promoted.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just one thing that was promoted on radio and in this whole phenomenon of called, quote-unquote, underground. Well, that's very segregated to me. I feel like it's not about being whether or not you're underground or mainstream. It's about whether it's great or not. Run DMC was mainstream, but it was great music, and they put out some really great music.
Yeah.
In their time, you know what I mean? So to me, it's just very segregated.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I know that you're a Christian now, and that according to your publicist, you're a minister. Can you maybe briefly share how you came to know God and describe how your life may have or may not have, you know, changed?
Sure. You know, I feel like I knew God. Well, I knew of God. I believed in God since I was very, very young. And in my young age, you know, I talked to him, I prayed to him, I believed that he would protect me, I believed that he was involved in my existence. And I believed that he could control my outcome, you know, that he ultimately had the control of where I would be. And so I believe that from a very young age. I loved the Bible, especially Genesis and Revelation, even as a young boy. But I didn't know too much in between. So it wouldn't be till I was probably 25 when I would truly start to understand who Jesus Christ exactly was, get all the myths out of the way as to him being European, him being a slave, a person that agrees with slavery, all of these various rumors that were going around that I was hearing, to get all of that out the way and actually understand what exactly Jesus stood for and who he is and what his mission is.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be till I was probably 25. 1996 to be exact, December 8th, I was baptized into Christ, and I was a Christian. And it took probably about 6 months for me to truly understand it, for me to get a lot of the distortions out of the way. But since then, so since 1996, I've been one, and that's about 19 years, almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years this December.
Wow.
So yeah, as far as in the ministry, I joined the ministry about, I'd say, 6 years after I became a Christian. So I guess it was 2002, and I've been in the ministry ever since. I do like small groups of singles and young marrieds. I lead whole churches at times and preach from the pulpit numerous times, travel and preach as well. And my wife and I help with marriage counseling. We help with financial counseling. Of course, in the entertainment industry, we help with entertainment counseling.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book called What is Success, which is a book about many of the things that I just discussed, but especially about the realities of success and what does it mean from God's perspective, because we always hear what success is from the world's point of view. So I wrote that book, and now my wife and I own an art school called The Victory Spot, where
Nice.
the premise of the art school is to teach people integrity, dignity, and yet be artists and get out there and do your thing, live your dream. So yeah, so it's been a long journey at ministry.
Yeah, you seem to be doing a little bit of everything, which is always awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of serving.
So I want to ask you, what do you think of the whole Christian rapper versus rapper who's a Christian debate or idea?
I don't tend to really get into the debates of it. So for me, I clearly look at myself as a rapper who's a Christian as opposed to a Christian rapper, but I'm not
Sure.
against the Christian rapper. I feel like each person has to have their own conviction as to which one they feel is serving God, if that's what their goal is to serve God.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I feel that I best serve God as a Christian, so that my personal walk with Jesus is one of striving at least to be righteous, striving to live a life that God would be proud of and that people could put a microscope under and still find inspiration. And at the same time, reach people of all backgrounds, which is what God has placed me on a pedestal to do. I mean, I've been on a pedestal in a sense since 1991, and that pedestal was not restricted to just other religious organizations. So for me,
Yeah.
I feel like God has placed me exactly where I need to be in order for me to accomplish the goals, which was one, find Him, and then second, to help find others for Him.
Okay, awesome. And speaking about Christian rappers, how do you feel about Christian hip hop? Do you follow along with some of the guys that are coming up? Do you think it's good? Is it getting better? Does it make sense to you? I know it doesn't make sense to some people, but
Right. It's much better. In fact, a lot of it's really compelling and great. I don't listen to it often, so here's my issue though. Like for me personally, and this is my issue with America's Christianity, period. So it's not really an issue with just rappers.
sure.
I think the perception of what Christianity is supposed to accomplish has been very manipulated in American culture to where in many instances it looks very much just like Faith America, as opposed to the Jesus that I read in the Bible, who was assassinated after 3 years of preaching.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find is that there's a lot of safe Christianity going on where it rarely tackles anything that is not safe to tackle. So, like, okay, there's it will tackle things like maybe getting along with other people, maybe being nice or politically correct, but it won't tackle, for instance, a lot of times, race issues in a very real and tangible way, which I care deeply about. And so it has, to that extent, it has turned me off, because it's like, well, why won't they speak on it? And this is even in churches. I'm not suggesting just to rap artists.
Yeah, yeah.
But even in a lot of churches, the response to Black Lives Matter will just be, that, hey, we just need to pray, and, God will take care of it all. God is still in control. And we agree with all of that. But where's the activism? Whereas when it comes to maybe AIDS or other diseases or things that are happening to people, there's this sense of urgency, whether it be adoptions or, I don't know, there's just many different issues that the churches feel safe enough to talk about. And so I do understand that in churches there's, if you bring up certain issues, even within the church, it can cause division, and it can cause people to be on different sides. But I think as a church that's living and breathing, I think it's important for the body to be able to learn from all sides and learn how to deal with issues that are a little tough to deal with. And at the same time, keep in mind the overall point of the church, which is the gospel and spreading the message of Christ's love. So I think that it's a fine line to walk, but it's one that I think needs to be walked. And every era that someone lives in, they're dealt cards, and they have to deal with the cards that are dealt with them. So, for instance, during Martin Luther King's era, when he was alive, before he was assassinated, cards were dealt of a segregated America, and Christians had to deal with it. They had to deal with it either which way, ignore it or jump in and start marching or do whatever. When it was slavery in this country, Christians had to either be abolitionists or they can deal with slavery and act like it doesn't exist. They could do whatever they chose. The people I most admire are those that decided to fight against the injustices of that time. We have injustices in this time. And to me, Christians have to be the same as they've always had to be, which is either get in the fight or, in my opinion, be cowardice and be afraid of the fight because of the cards that are dealt with you. You have to do something, one or the other.
Right. And you actually just painted a real good segue for my next question, which was going to be, I guess maybe to elaborate a little more on your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement, and also what do you think of big public statements such as, the whole stirred up controversy that happened because of Beyonce's performance at the Super Bowl?
Sure. A lot of times when people say Black Lives Matter, there's always somebody that says all lives matter.
Of course,
and
yeah.
I believe that Black Lives Matter is a reality because all lives don't matter yet. And the only reason it's a reality is because we've got to make all lives matter. Black lives have to be spoken about. And so if there's two houses and one is on fire and one is fine, you don't say, hey, fireman, go to all houses. You say, go to the house that's on fire. And so that's how I feel about the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a recognition of the fact that there's a need, and it's a very specific need. And when anyone in defense of that need mentions all lives matter, I just would point them to any other issue in this world. Why, if someone has a cancer march, they're not saying, well, why don't you have a blood drive march too? It's like, no, cancer is the reason we're marching right now, and that's enough. So I say the same about Black Lives Matter.
Right.
With the Beyonce Formation Super Bowl performance, to me it was just it shed light on the existing divide that's in our country, where to blacks it wasn't surprising, nor was it very radical. It was inspiring. She's an amazing performer. I think no one could take that away from her. And most blacks I talked to, none of them were appalled by it. None of them felt too deeply about it either which way from a political standpoint. They liked the performance. They may not have liked the song from a lyrical standpoint, some of the cussing and stuff like that was bleeped out. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's the reaction I get from most blacks. And to be honest, even most whites. However, there was obviously some whites that were very upset about it. And to me, that reminds me, or just sheds light on the huge divide of understanding of where black people see this country at. And it is a true fact of where we see it at. There is people dying. It is a problem. And it does need to be addressed. And the fact that many in our country still don't understand that it's happening and are surprised that someone's speaking out against it is a sad statement on the state of affairs of this country.
Yeah. No, awesome. And you know, you always see people's reactions on Facebook and Twitter and things, and some of my favorite ones were people who just have no idea what the song is about or anything that it represents, and they're like, oh, you know, Beyonce, what a great Super Bowl, you know, performance. And then of course you'll have someone comment, oh, did you know that, you know, it's anti-police, anti-whatever, and now all of a sudden the person who was just praising it now is jumping on the negativity bandwagon because they're just being swayed by what they hear, just like everyone else.
Right.
Especially on Facebook, you get a lot of opinions on Facebook for sure.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, just to make it clear, there's literally not one lyric in that song nor in that visual performance that suggests in any way that she's anti-police.
Right.
There's just literally no example of it. And I would like anybody, any reader or anybody, to cite where that exists. Because I don't see it. I've listened to the song about three times. I don't see any. I don't hear any lyrics. And I've watched the video probably twice, and I haven't seen any visuals that suggest anti-police.
Right. It's people creating their own propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I think too.
All right, and here would be my final question for you, and I feel like I'd miss an opportunity if I didn't ask it.
Sure.
Who are your top 5 MCs, dead or alive?
Good one.
I have to know.
It's tough because it changes often for me, but Chuck D would be my number 1.
Okay.
And number 2, I can give you my top 3. My number 1 would be Chuck D. My number 2, would have to be that's a tough one. I'd have to say somewhere in the realms of, you know, maybe De La. And which member, I don't know. I just would say De La.
I'll let it slide.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And then number 3 would probably be Nas.
Nas. Well, you can't go wrong with putting Nas in any sort of great hip-hop list.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah, Nas was probably my number 3.
All right, so anything else you want to add, plug, let the readers of Rapzilla know?
I would like to say definitely for people to go to our website, aztheband.com. Pick up the 2 albums, please. Pick them up. Actually get them. One's free, so that should definitely be no problem. But I would love for people to buy it, the second one too. This was never home. But no, I really appreciate y'all's support.